So I am back with another Manchester City transfer video today where I give you the latest updates on all Manchester City transfer news. And for the first time since I've started doing this video series, funnily enough, we've actually had a quiet week of Manchester City transfer news. Now, that doesn't mean that nothing has happened. I'm going to give you updates on all of the news that has come out over the past week. However, compared to what has been very busy weeks in the last couple of videos, this has been a relatively quiet week in comparison. And obviously that is partly down to the fact that Manchester City have gone and done our business very early in the window. We've gone and made all of the signings in that Club World Cup window that we were given. And now we've started the Club World Cup campaign. Obviously, there is not going to be that much action within that time frame. However, there still has been a decent amount of transfer news that has come out. You know, youth players that we have been signing or have been very close to signing, on top of the fact as well we do have quite a few players that have not gone to the Club World Cup, and even some that have been linked with moves away. So we're going to get into all of that today. However, just before I do start, if you do enjoy this video, make sure you hit the like button to let me know that you do enjoy the content. And on top of that as well, if you're here, you might as well hit the subscribe button. So go and do that if you do want to see more Manchester City transfer updates. But let's get straight into all of the news for this week. And since there is more transfer news this week in regards to players leaving the club than joining the club, I thought I would start with all of the transfer news surrounding players leaving the club. So let's start off firstly with the Kyle Walker situation, as it has come out that Fenerbahce have made an official offer for Kyle Walker, and this came out on the 13th of June, with it then coming out 3 days later that Kyle Walker is seen as a potential signing for Everton this summer, and that Walker is one of 4 right-back options being considered by Everton, with the Manchester City defender keen to explore a possible move. David Moyes believed the 35-year-old's experienced trophy-winning pedigree would be an asset to his team. However, it did come out a day later that a move to sign Kyle Walker is not believed to be a priority for Everton at this stage of the summer, with any interest currently being tentative at best. And ultimately, I think that Everton would be a good move for him. Now, obviously, it's come out that he is only one of the options and it is not a serious move at the moment. However, I do think Everton would be a decent move for him. The fact is, though, that I do think that he's starting to slip maybe past the Premier League top level. It depends where Everton are expecting to be next season. If they're wanting to be a club that is pushing for European football, maybe Kyle Walker could be a little bit of a liability at right back. I'm not saying he is completely past it. He can still do a job. But as we've seen in an England shirt recently, and for Manchester City and AC Milan this season, he is starting to slip a little bit mentally in terms of his focus at times as well. And he is on the decline a little bit physically. So maybe moving out to the Turkish league wouldn't be a bad option for him. But yeah, I mean, in terms of at the top level, at the top level, competing for top European places, Kyle Walker is finished, absolutely. And from one player that was left out of the Club World Cup squad to another, Jack Grealish is another, obviously, of those players that will be looking to get a move away from Manchester City this summer. It is very clear that we want to get him off the books, whether that's via a loan move or if that is by a permanent transfer. And we have got some recent updates on that situation, with it coming out that Napoli have showed interest in Jack Grealish in January, and Antonio Conte rates him, but they are yet to make a move this summer. The Serie A champions will not match Jack Grealish's wages, and it could be that Manchester City would have to fund as much as 50% of the fat salary to make a move realistic. With it also coming out that Manchester City are optimistic they will receive offers to sell Jack Grealish permanently, but other sources believe an initial loan move is more likely. It is unclear whether Grealish has a preference in terms of his next move, and that Tottenham are not expected to enter the race to sign Jack Grealish this summer. And ultimately, in my opinion, I do think there will be clubs that will be interested in signing Jack Grealish. But as I've mentioned in previous videos, I do think that this is a little bit of a sticky situation that Jack Grealish and Manchester City are both in because of the wages. As you saw in the Napoli report that came out, they only want to pay 50% of his wages. And that is because he's on 300 grand a week, which is a big issue in terms of offloading him. Because if you want to get a good transfer fee for him, then that club is going to want to offer reduced wages. And the question then becomes, does Jack Grealish want to reduce the wages by the amount that club want? And on top of that as well, if you can't find a deal in this current market for Jack Grealish at the price you want, then you got to go via a loan move. And if he goes out on loan, obviously that club might not want to pay 300 grand per week for a player that, let's be real, doesn't have an incredible return of goals and assists. So I do think that that complicates the move a little bit. I do think that that will mean that Jack Grealish's move away from Manchester City will not be anything imminent. I do think it will drag on throughout the summer. But I do think it's going to be complicated. So I think going forward in this transfer window, I'm going to be giving you much more updates on Jack Grealish potentially leaving the club, or not potentially, he will be leaving the club. And another player that does look like they will be leaving this summer is Ilkay Gundogan. And yes, he has gone to the FIFA Club World Cup. He is in the squad. He probably will play. However, it does look more likely that he will leave Manchester City this summer by some of the reports coming out, as 5 days ago it came out, according to Pletty that Galatasaray have expressed interest in Ilkay Gundogan, but there are currently no negotiations taking place and a matter has not progressed at this stage. The midfielder is fully focused on the FIFA Club World Cup. However, it did come out, according to Jack Gorn, who is a relatively reliable Manchester City journalist today, that Galatasaray are hopeful of signing Manchester City's Ilkay Gundogan this summer. And personally for me, I think that this would make sense all around personally, because Ilkay Gundogan is coming towards the end of his Manchester City career. We all know that. He's 35 years old now, and he has slowed down dramatically. We've seen that this season with his performances without Rodri in the midfield. And with us now signing Tajani Reinders and Nico Gonzalez, I do think we have enough cover in that midfield area where we can allow either Bernardo Silva or Ilkay Gundogan to leave. And personally for me, I think Ilkay Gundogan is probably the better option of the two. And I do think moving to a club like Galatasaray is probably the best for Ilkay Gundogan's personal sake as well. And while we're on the topic of Bernardo Silva as well, it has also come out that Bernardo Silva is set to stay at Manchester City this summer, with him just being announced as well as the new captain for the new season. And personally for me, I think this probably makes sense. I do think towards the back end of the season, out of Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan, Bernardo Silva was the one that offered more to the Manchester City side. And I do think his performances towards the end of the season were actually quite good. And I do think as well, he offers a good amount of versatility to the team. So I'm personally a big fan of this. I do think that keeping Bernardo Silva over Ilkay Gundogan for another season is the right idea. And ultimately, I know there's going to be some fans that disagree with that, but I do think that keeping Bernardo Silva is relatively smart. But one thing that wouldn't be smart, in my opinion, would be losing Ederson from the side, as news has broken this week that Ederson's future will be decided after the FIFA Club World Cup. City Extra understand the 31-year-old wants to stay, but is also open to leaving, and Manchester City are prepared to sell if a good offer arrives this summer. And personally for me, at the age of 31, I do not think that selling Ederson is a good idea. I think he is a world-class goalkeeper, if not borderline world-class goalkeeper, and very unique in what he offers to specifically a Guardiola side, but obviously as well Manchester City just in general. And I think selling him could be a big mistake. Now, I know what the club are thinking. The club are thinking in terms of the amount of money that they can get in compared to what maybe they will be getting in for him in a couple years' time. But I would rather the performances guaranteed on the pitch, in which Ederson can offer, over, getting the money for him this window, but then bringing in someone who's maybe a little bit less reliable, someone we don't know if he's going to work. And we have a situation like we did with Claudio Bravo, where it just went drastically wrong with the goalkeeper in net. So for me personally, I would rather hold on to Ederson. I would rather sell Ortega, in my opinion, and then bring in another goalkeeper potentially, if that's what we're thinking of doing, to be able to supplement alongside Ederson before obviously he eventually does depart from the team. And that is all the transfer news on players potentially going out of the club this summer from this week. However, let's get into some of the players that we have been linked to this week, and we're going to be starting off with a transfer news story that is not as positive as some of the ones that I've been giving you in previous weeks, and that is on the Tino Livramento front, as it has come out that Eddie Howe has communicated he absolutely wants to keep Tino Livramento. The player has shown no desire to leave Newcastle, and Manchester City do not want to get involved in a summer-long saga. And for me personally, I don't think it is smart for the club to go after Tino Livramento at the price of paying over what he is worth. In my opinion, I would not pay anything more than £50 million for Tino Livramento. And it does look, by some of the reports I've seen, that Newcastle would want northwards of about 70, 80 million for Livramento. And if those price quotes are to be believed, I think that is way overpriced. And I think Manchester City should move on, whether they want to go and target another right back, which I do think is something we need to do. We do need to get a right back in the team with Kyle Walker leaving the club. But overall for me, Livramento is not worth chasing, and it does look like we've been kind of chasing a lost cause in the last couple of weeks, because every single bit of reporting that I'm seeing coming out of Newcastle is that Livramento wants to stay and that Newcastle do not want to sell. But other than that, there really hasn't been that much more news on the transfers in front, and that kind of makes sense obviously with some of the signings, or all of the signings that we have made so far in this window. The only real piece of news in regards to the first team that we have received this week is that Gibbs White would still be open to joining Manchester City. City, linking up with close friend Phil Foden, as well as working with Pep Guardiola. It now remains to be seen whether he reappears on Manchester City's radar or whether that route is now closed. And for me personally, I think that route is closed. I've seen reports that after we signed Tijjani Reinders and Ryan Cherki, that we were no longer interested in the signing of Morgan Gibbs White. And that makes sense with the amount of money that Morgan Gibbs White is going to be likely to cost. On top of the fact that we've already recruited in those positions, I would be surprised if we made another attempt to go and sign Morgan Gibbs White this window. But other than that, all of the news that's kind of come out in regards to Manchester City bringing players in this last week has been on the youth front. And I'm going to give you some of the updates just in case you are interested in that stuff. It has come out that Sheffield Wednesday striker Kaylan Cole Kadamateri, who is 15 years old, is close to finalising a move to Manchester City worth around 1.5 million. The teenager is expected to sign for Manchester City subject to his return from holiday in Dubai later this month and passing a medical. And it has also come out that Manchester City are closing in on Liverpool under 15 midfielder Calum Moss, and that they are also advancing in talks to sign Tottenham midfielder Dexter Oliver, and that is coming out according to Fabrizio Romano, with it also coming out according to David Ornstein that we are set to sign an Aston Villa midfielder named Freddie Laurie. And look, ultimately I have nothing to say on these players. I do not know how good they are. All I can say is that I trust Manchester City's academy. I trust the way that we scout players. We bring them into the academy system. We make profit on players if they're not good enough to go into the first team. We've seen that with a lot of players that have been sold on for profit from the Manchester City academy. So I think the Manchester City academy have every single idea of what they're doing, and I have no doubt that these signings will probably be sold for a profit in the future, if not make the first team. But as I said, it is a little bit shorter of a transfer update for this week, just surely because there has been much less going on due to the fact we're playing in the Club World Cup and we've done our business early. But that is all of the news from this week. If you do want to see more news consistently every single week of Manchester City's transfer business, make sure you hit the like button just to boost me in the algorithm, make me happy. And on top of that, hit the subscribe button as well so you can see more of my content and support the channel. But for now, that is all. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.